Welcome inside the Broncos podcast studio for another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. A tough loss on Sunday as the Broncos fall to the Jaguars at home, ending their winning streak both overall and at home. It was a tough one, but the guys seem optimistic in the locker room in terms of still being in control of their own destiny. We're going to get to that, the mindset of this team. We're going to get into the offense and the defense and really break down this Sunday matchup that just happened. Week 16 is behind us. A lot to look forward to. But as always, we want to get your key takeaways from this game as you kind of had 24 hours to digest it and like kind of see what stood out to you the most.
Yeah, and it's a short week, obviously, so we'll turn our attention quickly toward the Week 17 Christmas Day game against Kansas City. We'll talk a little bit about that today, and also we'll have more content for everybody here tomorrow. So we'll have plenty of stuff on that coming up. But I think in order to get ready, and one of the big takeaways I had from listening to Sean Payton, from listening to the guys in the locker room about moving forward, about using this loss to kind of have a positive moving forward, you've got to look back at it, right? And Sean Payton basically said that after the game, that you can't just kind of spit this one out. You got to digest it. You got to find a way to take lessons from this game. And several guys said that. Mike McGlinchey, I believe, every loss has lessons. And so what are the lessons you can take from this game? That's kind of what we'll get into. Big picture, I think what Sean Payton said on Monday was true, is that the Jaguars beat them in all three areas on Sunday. And what that doesn't mean is that the Jaguars will beat them in all three areas if they play again. That's not necessarily what that means. It doesn't mean that the Broncos can't use this to spur themselves forward, that they can't find momentum and pick things up and start a new win streak. But what it does mean is that in this particular game, they got beat in all three phases. And I think we'll talk about a couple of bright spots and then kind of what we learned from all three of those phases. But on this particular day, the Broncos lost this football game. And one of the things Sean Payton mentioned is that nobody ran from that. Nobody had kind of other illusions that it was the referee's fault or whatever else. Like, no, they know that they got beat on this day. And so you're then able to take that, I think, and move forward. And I also think if you look at this game, something that stood out is that midway through the third quarter, you're still tied 17-17. And even after you go down 24-17, you've got that trick play to Courtland Sutton. If he hauls that in, you're inside the 10-yard line and with a chance to tie the game at 24 all. And there were moments here and there throughout the game where it was a third down conversion for Jacksonville. It was a penalty, and I know I just said a second ago that wasn't the reason for the loss, but a penalty here, a third down conversion here, a missed opportunity for the Broncos offense in the passing game, which we'll talk about. It was several moments, and then all of a sudden, instead of – and this is what happens when you play a good football team, and I think Marvin Mims is the one who said it after the game, that when you play a good team – they're going to put their foot down and they're going to kind of, they're going to find a way to grab that win. And so for the Broncos, there were chances where it could have been 24-24, could have gotten a stop, could have, late in the game, a couple fourth down opportunities, have a chance to try to come back. There were moments, and unfortunately, the Broncos weren't able to capitalize on those. And over the course of this 11-game win streak, we've seen them do it again and again, where they made big plays and big moments, and you almost expect them to do it now. And you learn in this game that they're not invincible, and you've got to find a way to make those plays. And so I'm not down on the team, because I think that you look at, like I just mentioned, a bunch of different plays, and in a few of them, it's not one of those games that if one play had gone the other way, you win the football game. But if you can take 3 or 4 of those plays and bring them back to your side, now you're in a place where you do probably win the football game, and this win streak is still going. So not down on the Broncos, but I do think it's a good reminder of the level you need to play at when you play a contender like Jacksonville, because that's what Jacksonville is. They're 11-4. Trevor Lawrence is playing as good as any quarterback in the NFL right now. This is the type of challenge you're gonna face in the postseason. And I think there was maybe a sentiment among fans that, hey, you clinch that 1 seed, you're at home, like business is going to take care of itself. Yeah. Still got to show up and play and win the football game and do everything it takes to win the football game. So that kind of stands out to me in terms of this game and what we saw.
A lot of the guys were asked after the game about, can this serve as an emotional reset? Do you feel like this loss is kind of coming at a quote-unquote good time? These guys want to win. And a lot of the guys in the locker room said, like, look, we can't really think about that because we want to win. We want to win every game. And the bounce back is what really shows the caliber of this team. And I forgot who in the locker room specifically said it, but they mentioned, we lost 2 games and then we won 11 straight, that we can bounce back. We've done it. And I think adversity really kind of fuels this team. Evan Ingram was asked after the game, what positives can you take out of this game despite the loss? And he was like, well, it's hard for me to answer that right after a loss. He was like, well, if there's one thing I know about this team and this locker room is that we don't back down from a challenge. We are very resilient. We've seen adversity in the past. We've had gut-wrenching losses that we've learned from. And even in the wins, we always learn from. And it comes from top to bottom, whether it's, head coach Sean Payton mentioning like that attitude of moving on week to week after a win. It happens with the losses too, but they go back and they see what they did wrong in all the games, not just the ones that they lose. So I think when you look at this offense and what they were able to produce, there were some bright spots. In particular, I feel like the run game really kind of got going there. Harvey had a couple really good explosive plays, and that's what you want to see is just that explosiveness from this offense that's really going to carry you to the next level.
Yeah, and I think starting with Harvey, the run game, I think, has been something that's been kind of the work in progress since Dobbins got hurt, and we've had some games where the rushing totals have been up. And one of the bright spots in this game was RJ Harvey sets a new career high in scrimmage yards. I think you saw Sean Payton talks a lot about the contact balance with RJ Harvey, and you saw that on his long touchdown run. There's certainly an element of explosiveness with RJ Harvey that he brings. And for a rookie now who still leads the NFL, leads all rookies in scrimmage touchdowns, a guy that I think gets more and more comfortable each week. And we heard him talk last couple weeks about, hey, early in the year, he's swimming a little bit, right? Trying to figure out, the offense, everything that goes with being an NFL player. And it feels like he's more comfortable now. And we'll see how it all plays out. And, if Dobbins returns at some point, but I think what's clear is that RJ Harvey is starting to emerge as a guy that you can count on. And, didn't get a ton of carries in this game, just 7 rushes for 50 yards and another 4 catches for 71 yards. So making the most of those opportunities, but I'll be interested down the stretch, whether it's against Kansas City, LA in week 18, and then obviously whoever the Broncos' first playoff opponent is, like, do we start to see more and more of RJ Harvey? We know the importance of running the football to this team. It might have been a matchup-based thing that the Broncos only ran the ball. Their running backs only had 12 combined carries in this game, but it could be more of a matchup thing. But I think we know based on Sean Payton's philosophy that good defense and good running game help a young quarterback, help any quarterback, really, that we'll continue to see RJ Harvey be a focal point. And, he was a guy that I thought in terms of explosiveness stood out on Sunday against Jacksonville, and you just want to continue to find a way to get him the ball. So, there's things to talk about kind of bigger picture with the offense, and we can get into that in a second. But from an RJ Harvey standpoint, I'd imagine he stood out as well to you.
Yeah, RJ Harvey, and then Troy Franklin had a couple of big, nice plays, and you continue to see that connection grow between him and Bo Nix. And again, like that's what you want to see. And you mentioned it; they were just like a couple more plays away from really capping off drives. But the good part is like you're able to connect with your receivers on those big, deep passes. That can lead to some points. And obviously, this Jaguars team, as you mentioned, like they're really good. And a lot of the country hasn't seen them because like they haven't been on like primetime games as much as other teams have. But the run that they've been going on over the last few weeks, they're right there on the top of the AFC with a chance to kind of really make a push, especially as they lead their division now. And I think with this team, you mentioned it, they all acknowledge like, we got beat, we understand, and we're not invincible, but we know like we can play better than this. And this is when we go back and they watch film as a team without coaches, and they kind of just come together as their own units. And I think that's what makes this team special and this offense special because they hold each other accountable. Whether you talk to Marvin Mims or you talk to Cortland Sutton, all those guys, they're leaders in the locker room, and they understand, like, regardless of an 11-game winning streak, because they take it one game at a time, this is the game we have to focus on and fix all the mistakes that we had, but still look at the positives that the overall offense was able to produce.
Yeah, I think this is a game where offensively the opportunities were there, and I think you can scroll through the game book and look at all the different plays. And, there's a 3rd and 2 in the first half. RJ Harvey goes backwards for a couple yards, and the Broncos settle for a field goal to take a 10-7 lead instead of potentially going up 14-7. Toward the end of the first half, the Broncos have a 3rd and 4. As they're trying to retake the lead before halftime, they're unable to convert. The Jags go down, score another field goal. Now it's 17-10. So the end of the first half, they're a chance to either cut the lead to 1 at halftime or take the lead going into the locker room with a chance to double up. That was a big moment for me in terms of, hey, where could this offense have capitalized a little bit? Obviously, then there's some huge plays, right? Like there are chunks. There's a pass to Marvin Mims that set up that field goal I mentioned on the first drive of the second half. The Broncos go right down the field, spurred by that 38-yard Harvey touchdown. And then there were some moments where, after the Jags retake the lead, it's a 3-and-out. And then you get the ball back after the Jags go up 14. And I believe that was when the Broncos start to drive and they have or actually on that 3-and-out, that's when you have the big trick play. RJ Harvey takes a direct snap, ends up with Bo Nix. He launches it deep to Courtland Sutton. Probably a little bit underthrown, but Courtland Sutton also has the ball in his hands. Just got to find a way to make that catch there. Again, you would have been inside the 10-yard line. And then that's where, at that point you're down 14 points. Broncos get the ball back. There's the fumble. Jags go up 17, and now you're kind of chasing, and you have to get a little bit one-dimensional, have to get away a little bit from the run game. But there were just moments, right, where you're almost there, but not quite. And, Bo has that deep pass to Troy Franklin. You get down to the Jacksonville 3. It's 2nd and 3, end up with a field goal. You end up with a 4th and 2 on the next drive at the Jacksonville 41. Bo Nix gets intercepted, and obviously he said he should have put the ball somewhere else after the game. You get another opportunity where you're down, and I believe it's like 4th and 3, but then they rule that Bo Nix has stepped out of bounds, so it's actually 4th and 11, and that pass is incomplete. So there were chances, and it still probably would have been unlikely late in the game to come back from 14 down against a team of that caliber that, to be honest, in the fourth quarter probably got a little conservative in terms of how they attacked their own drives. And after the field goal drive, the Broncos got the ball back just a minute later. So maybe they would have gotten a little more aggressive. Who knows how it would have all played out. But I think when you look back at it, Sean Payton's message was, and this was interesting, guys just need to do their job. And you hear that a lot with coaches of do your job. And obviously Bill Belichick made that kind of the staple of the Patriots for so many years of don't worry about doing anybody else's job, do your job. And Sean Payton was saying whether it's the protection, whether it's the depth of the route, whether it's the progression from a quarterback standpoint, these things from a detailed perspective all matter. And you've got to be on top of them and not try to do a little bit more if you're a receiver or an offensive lineman or a running back or quarterback. Just, and again, don't know exactly who Sean Payton's referencing there, but he said there were opportunities to be made. And so that to me is like, okay, here's an opportunity to reset. You're going into a short week against Kansas City. Can you find a way, if you're the Broncos offense, to get back to the details and get back to the little things? And as we talked about the defense, Alex Singleton kind of mentioned something similar in the locker room. But that's where, as you talk about it, and we'll get to it in a second, the ability to reset and move forward, it's a good reminder of like, yeah, we may have won 11 in a row, but you still got to be on top of it. You still got to play with all those details, because otherwise this is a sort of thing that can happen against a good football team. So offensively, I don't look at it as, like, I know there's a lot of chatter about Bo online again this morning, but like I thought Bo played a pretty good football game. There are certainly a couple throws he'd want back in the second half as they're chasing, but I think that's a difficult spot for any quarterback when you're trailing by multiple possessions and you're trying to come back and they know you're throwing the football. That makes things difficult. So, it hopefully is one that you can flush and move on from. And, 5 of 14 on third down, got to be better there, obviously. But you look at the yardage, 445 net yards, 6.8 yards per play, over 100 yards rushing. You have the 2 turnovers, but those were late in the football game as you're coming back. Like, I think I don't know about a lot, but like certainly enough of the numbers point to like there was some offensive success here. The Broncos had almost as many first downs as the Jags. They outgained them by 100 yards. Again, more average yards per play. Like there were some good things there. It just came down to some operation and execution on key plays. And again, like 3 or 4 opportunities on offense, 3 or 4 on defense. You're talking about a different ball game. Mm-hmm. And I think what's key is that some teams, like you say that every week, right? Like, and I've covered a lot of games here over the past 10 seasons, right? And there's been times where I've said, hey, it's just a few plays here, a few plays there. And the reality is that some teams aren't as apt to make those plays. And some teams every week fail to make those plays. And some teams aren't talented enough to make those plays week in and week out. And this is not one of those situations. We've seen the Broncos make these plays. Just a week ago, they had a really effective day against a talented, top-ranked Packers defense. And so this team is capable of making those plays, and you hope to chalk this up to just a tough day at the office, but you've also got to make the corrections. And that, again, goes back to Sean Payton saying you can't just pretend that this didn't happen. You have to react and treat it accordingly in terms of making those corrections. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the offense moving forward, but I don't know. I saw enough that it wasn't like you weren't moving the ball and you went 3 and out every time and you just really struggled to get anything going. That wasn't the case at all. Like this team actually moved the ball really well. They only had 1 3 and out the entire game, and that was on the very first possession of the game. And for a team that has struggled at times this year with 3 and outs, I think that's actually encouraging for the Broncos. And if you can just convert a couple of those third downs, convert a couple of those fourth downs toward the end when you need it, like this could swing very quickly. So I actually look at this and I'm like, the offense moved the ball well. It's just, can you get back to converting when it matters?
I think you made a good point of what head coach Sean Payton said of just not getting too ahead of yourself, not trying to do more than what is asked, and kind of like just this team works so well together. And that complementary football, we saw moments of it when they're able to drive down the field and cap it off with a touchdown. And I think for this game in particular, there were a few moments that you kind of felt like that was the hump they were going to get over. Adam Troutman spoke about that, where he's like, through the course of the game, I was kind of like, okay, like we've been here before. Okay, we're going to get past this. And that's the attitude you do want your sideline to have. You want them to know that they're always going to be in it. Now, this time it didn't go their way, but it's something that they're almost were like, okay, well, so what do we do wrong that it didn't go our way this time? And I think that goes back to just them holding each other accountable, them realizing that this was a tough matchup, but they're still in control of what their destiny is. They have a lot more work to do. And I think they all kind of touched on the fact that it's almost, I'm not going to say better, but the fact that this is a short week, you're able to kind of flush this loss out faster than you would have to normally, because you now have to turn the page to Kansas City. And again, we'll get to that in a second. And this defense has a chance to kind of bounce back from their performance by going into a primetime game against the AFC West rival. And as Mike McGlinchey said it himself after the game, he doesn't care who's playing. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a great franchise, and they know that they're going to go out and play really hard. And so it doesn't matter who's on the field. They have to prepare and be able to bounce back. So how do you see the defense doing that following this Sunday performance?
Yeah, I think that I would expect them to bounce back. And it's also, you made the point there about like, hey, thinking things are going to flip. And I agree with you. There were several times where you're like, that deep pass to Troy Franklin, or you're able to hold him to a quick stop, and you're like, is this the, like, it was like trying to rev an engine or get an engine to turn over that hasn't, like, you haven't quite be able to start the car, and like you can hear it trying to go, and then you can't quite get it there. But there were a couple times where you're like, oh, maybe it's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to the resiliency of this team as well, that like you're down 14, it would have been easy to let that game get even more out of hand, and the Broncos still kept fighting and trying to get back in the football game. And again, I really think, especially in the second half, you're a Cortland Sutton catch on that trick play, or you're a 3rd and 3 stop away, or you're a 4th down conversion, or you're punching it in after the Troy Franklin, where like all of a sudden, if it gets to 10 points or 7 points in the second half, like because the defense, and we'll get to that now, is that like there was a stretch there that obviously wasn't pretty, right? The Broncos start really well on defense. 3 of the first 4 Jacksonville drives were 3-and-outs. They had minus 11 yards on 3 of those drives. The other drive, which was a touchdown drive, really only happened because of that penalty on P.J. Locke, which, again, as P.J. talked about last night, there's no way he was able to hear the whistle there. It was an honest mistake. I think if you watch the clip back, there's a lot of guys that are still playing. There's offensive linemen for the Jags who are still blocking. There's defensive linemen for the Broncos trying to get after the quarterback. It was not a situation where P.J. Locke was like the only guy doing this. It was loud. You heard Rick Lewis on the radio, KOA broadcast say that's the loudest he's ever heard it there, especially early, and the crowd was in it, and I hope that stays the case, when knock on wood, a playoff game is here in a few weeks. So the difficulty became after that. There was a stretch of 5 consecutive possessions where the Jags scored on each of those 5 drives. 3 of those were touchdowns. Obviously, the red zone numbers were not what we're accustomed to seeing. We're so used to this Broncos defense locking things down in the red zone, the number 1 red zone defense in the NFL. Allowed touchdowns on the first 4 possessions. Third down was equally, an aberration as well. The Jags, I think, only ended up like 8 of 15 on third down, but they started 7 of 10, I believe, and just really there were some back-breaking ones. And I kind of go back to that 3rd and 3. The Broncos are down 7. They've just had that possession where they go 3-and-out, and Cortland can't quite haul in that pass on the deep one from Bo on the trick play. And if you get a stop, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, we've got another chance. And it's 3rd and 3. Parker Washington gets open, slips a tackle, and runs 63, 68, something like that, like a long, long way, and puts the Jags in position to score another touchdown and go up 14. And that's where late in the third quarter, you're like, it's a little out of whack. It leads to the fumble, and kind of things go from there. That was, and I've seen a couple people mention it, that was a turning point. And so there were some 3rd and longs that the Jags converted, and you got to give them credit. Like they've got playmakers on that side of the ball. ETN had a strong second half. Trevor Lawrence played really well after that first quarter. Both in terms of I thought he extended plays really well. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, is this a one-off, or is this a kind of a theme? And you listen to Sean Payton on Monday, and he kind of disagreed with the notion that, because last year the Broncos defense struggled a little bit late in the year. I think part of that was due to injuries. I think part of that was due to the slate of quarterbacks they played late in the year with Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes.
A really tough stretch last year.
Yeah, but and I guess actually not Mahomes, but Jameis came in, threw it around when the Broncos were dealing with some injuries. This, at least so far, doesn't feel like that to Sean Payton, and I would kind of agree, because as recently as a week ago, you've got a really good offense in the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, a bunch of different receivers, and the difference there was, if you look at it, the Packers also had a stretch where they scored on 5 consecutive possessions, but the difference was the red zone, and the Broncos allowed 1 touchdown and 3 field goals instead of, in this case, 4 touchdowns in a row and 4 red zone drives. And we talked about it after the game that being down 6-0 is a whole lot different than being down 14. And so you got to find a way to tighten up the red zone defense. And again, I kind of, it's a week-to-week league, right? So everyone's going to look at this and say there's a blueprint now. And Nick Bonito did mention after the game that since the bye week, he didn't feel like this team has played up to its potential. And maybe there's something to that. There's been more passing yards. Vance Joseph has talked about the fact that teams kind of adapt to this as the season goes on. But that said, the red zone defense has been so good week in and week out that I kind of want to see it again in terms of okay, if it happens again, whether this week or next week against LA where it's a problem, then maybe you think, okay, well, is there something here? But until that, we've just seen the red zone defense be so good that I kind of have this belief that they'll get it right in Kansas City. And obviously that's as we're recording this right now, a 3rd-string quarterback. So it's a different challenge than playing Trevor Lawrence, right? But not that you don't need to be ready, because you can lose to anybody in this league if you're not ready. But defensively, I have this faith that the red zone performance over the course of a whole season is more likely to show up again than the kind of this one aberration. So we'll see how that goes. But the other thing is that a week ago, forced 2 turnovers, and that ended up being critical. I think you got to find a way to, and it hasn't been something that at all times this year the Broncos done, but they've been better in recent weeks at forcing turnovers. You got to get back to that as we get to the late stages of the regular season and the playoffs.
Yeah, defensive coordinator Vance Joseph did mention earlier that you always have to make adjustments. If you can't make adjustments, whether it's in game or looking back after the game, it's really hard to win in this league, and that's true. And I think you make a good point just to the fact of the chances of this defense having a repeat performance like that are not as high as them going back to what their bread and butter is and what they've done all season long when it comes to these teams. And when you talk about being ready, all these guys know that. And regardless of who the quarterback is going to be for the Kansas City Chiefs, we saw the way that, Jordan Love went down in that game against the Bears. I believe Malik Willis came in for them, and he gave them a really good chance to win that game because the Bears defense hadn't, seen him, hadn't really kind of played. And so they were able to kind of catch them off guard, and the Packers went on a little bit of a run there, and obviously the Bears ended up winning that game. But it's like, you never know. These are all professional football players. They all go through the offseason program. They all have talent, and so you never know what you're going to get, and sometimes you can get a performance like that from the backup. That's what they're for. That's what they get paid for, to come in when the starter's hurt and perform. And so I think this team and this defense is ready to kind of handle that and take on that challenge regardless of who's playing. And you don't know exactly what that matchup is going to look like per se as we're recording this, but it's going to be one that I think the Broncos are looking forward to, and that all comes down to the mindset of this team and kind of like the overall character and identity of what this team and what the cultures that Sean Payton has been building here over the last few years in terms of not only moving on, but understanding, again, it's one game at a time. You move on from this one, just like you move on from the wins, and you move forward. And a lot of the guys really had that quote unquote like positive outlook despite the loss. Yes, they did not want to lose. Yes, they hate losing more than they like winning. That is definitely a quote I heard multiple times from different guys in the locker room after the game on Sunday. But that mindset of resiliency, it's something that's been built since last season when they had gut-wrenching losses and losses that potentially would have hurt their playoff chances in X, Y, and Z. Everything is still in front of them right now. We'll get into the AFC West number 1 seed scenarios in just a second. But when you look at the mindset of this team and the resiliency that they're able to do, how big of a role does that play when you're bouncing back on a short week, Christmas Day, primetime lights?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting being in the locker room after the game because everyone has like a little bit of a different spin on kind of the same message, right? And like everyone's message was, we got to get past this quick, right? But you had guys like Alex Singleton who were like, why would you want to forget about it? Like, remember exactly how this felt and take that and use it to fuel you. And other guys were like, hey, we just got to kind of learn from this and move on quickly. And then you had guys who were, Alex Singleton, for example, was like, I'm not going to freak out here. We've won 12 games. This is not a game in September where we're still learning about ourselves. Like, we know who we are. We know we're a good enough football team to have won 12 games. Like, are there things to be better at? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that you kind of
raining
panic
on your parade.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that's quite what he said, but it was close. And then you've got guys like Nick Bonito like took the blame and put it on himself and said he didn't play well enough and that he needs to be better, and that it was on nobody but him. And I think that all of those different reactions, and we could go on and on about how different guys reacted to it, but like I'd imagine it all leads to the same thing, which is that you're going to get a fired up Broncos team, and particularly I think the defense, because they're going to hear this week about all these different things of like, oh, are they struggling? Is this another late season drop off? I think they're going to be ready to go Thursday, and sometimes even when you're winning, or especially when you're winning, you can make the corrections and move on in the next week and keep winning. But I think there can be an edge that maybe like when you become, and I saw a couple people, somebody was asked about this last night, like when you become the hunted instead of the hunter, there's like a different mentality. And can the Broncos go back to kind of being that team that's motivated and not that they weren't motivated for like the 1 seed, but I think that they've been in a good spot, and it's been a little bit since they've had like real tangible adversity in terms of a win or a loss. And so those are the things that I think you use those and they fuel you moving forward. And it's a little bit tricky to kind of project how does that play out, because you've got a Thursday night game where, again, you're playing a quarter. The Chiefs are on their third string quarterback. They've got a lot of guys banged up. It's an opportunity for the Broncos to go take care of business, but then, like, can you not get, if you're able to get a win this week, can you, like, not get too high off of that coming into a potential must-win game against the Chargers? And so this next, 10 days or so, starting with the Chiefs game, is really interesting because the Broncos are still in control of their own destiny. With 2 wins, they're going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. They would win the AFC West. Both of those things are true. Could win the AFC West as soon as this weekend. But to me, you've got to manage, like, whatever you feel this week coming into a game right after a loss, trying to beat a division rival on the road on Christmas. Like, that same intensity then has to be recaptured for the next week. And so it'll just be interesting to see kind of the ebbs and flows of the next the next 10 days or so, because what you can't let happen is that if you go in and find a way to win in Kansas City where you will be favored pretty significantly, you can't then kind of like dovetail back toward, we're good again. Like that right. Same intensity, I think, has to be bottled up for the next 2 weeks to be able to secure home field. And we'll talk about all the possibilities and all those sorts of things, because it's truly too early to know, like, what is next Sunday going to look like. But this week in particular, it does feel like a good week to kind of like move on quickly and try to find a way to get a win in Kansas City.
It's really interesting because I remember going back to week 1, or actually after week 3, and we talked about how this Chargers game is going to be a good measuring stick on how the Broncos started and where they're ending, because they played the Chargers so early and they're not going to see them to the end of the season. And I think you had called it and kind of like, we don't know how the season's going to play out, but this could easily be the game that can come down to who wins the AFC West. Now, as you mentioned, the Broncos can clinch that this weekend. But talking about the AFC picture in particular, the AFC is stacked this year. And I think after the wins and losses from Sunday, as you mentioned, the Broncos are on top. They're the number 1 seed currently, standing at 12-3. New England won. They beat the Ravens, so they're now 12-3. But as we mentioned, the Broncos hold the tiebreaker there due to sweeping the Raiders and the Patriots having a loss against the Raiders. 3rd is Jacksonville. 4th is Pittsburgh. And in the wild card, you have the Chargers, Buffalo, and Houston. Chargers face Houston this weekend at home. And then in the hunt is Indy, who has a big game on Monday Night Football against the 49ers, and then Baltimore, that's standing at 7-8. It's everyone that's in the top 8 has minimal, well, minus the Steelers, everyone has at least 10 wins. And the guys all season have talked about, it's just a race to 10, it's a race to 10. And now it's a race to just win out. And so we talked about the AFC being tougher and being, a very short, margin for error with this team. And with the Patriots winning, now I believe it's like, I think they had it like 40% chance for each of them. It's a toss-up on who's going to win the number 1 seed. But what Broncos country needs to remember is the Broncos are still in control of that. And that's something that they've worked for, and they've put themselves in a position by winning 11 games straight and taking care of certain matchups that you had to win in order to be in this position, where you're not hoping that someone loses on, you have to win and someone loses and this team loses and things like that for you to get what you want. If you continue to stick to your game and do what needs to be done, that's kind of got you to this point, you get everything you wanted, which is the first 2 goals that, head coach Sean Payton had kind of laid out for this team.
Yeah, and you're right in terms of the 11 wins, because I think there was a point where it was like, hey, the Broncos are 1-2. Can you get to like 3-4, or like, can you get to 4-3? And then, hey, can you get to 6 and instead of, or you get to the bye at whatever the Broncos were then, like 8-2, 9-2, and it's like, okay, well, can you win these 2 against the Commanders and Raiders, and then can you split and instead of all these scenarios that we play out in our heads or fans play out in their heads of like, can you split the first 4 and then win 3 of the next 4? And like the Broncos just went on this stretch where they won 11 in a row, and it takes we sat here after week 3 and we were like, it's going to be tough for the Broncos to catch the Chargers in this division because they've got a 3-game lead, the division record. And to some degree, like the fact that the Chargers have that division record is why this is still so close. But it went from like, okay, you've got to do these things to make the playoffs. And then each week it was like, I remember thinking a few weeks ago, okay, after the bye, hey, the Broncos might need to win, 5 of their last 6 or whatever to get the first round bye. And then it becomes, okay, if like say you had lost to the Packers, then you'd have to win 3 in a row. And now instead you only have to win 2 in a row. And so each win has built you a little bit of a buffer. That said, it's not supposed to be easy. And teams that, we've seen it. We've seen it with teams that have won the Super Bowl for the Broncos before. Like there's been adversity and you work through it. And the Broncos have the chance to win the 1 seed still and control their own destiny. But if they don't win these games, then, you might end up going on the road. And so there is this kind of there's like this dual excitement over what's still possible with also, of course, like the nerves of, hey, we want to close this out. And I think you mentioned the AFC, 1 seed aside, you're talking about an AFC West that if the Chargers and Broncos both win this weekend, then you're going to have either a 13-win team or a 12-win team that does not win its division, because either the Broncos will end up 13-4 with a loss to the Chargers that knocks them out of the division, or the Chargers will be 12-5 and not win the division. So, I mean, we talk about kind of what it takes to win a division, and you think you're probably going to be competing against the Chiefs for that. And in this case, Chiefs are not in it, and 2 teams that are surging. You're going to have a 12 or 13-win team going on the road in the first week of the playoffs. And so it's a tough race. Like if you were in a lot of these other divisions, North, South, actually,
they're kind of all like one game. They're all on the same situation. Yeah.
You're going to have some really good wild card teams in this postseason. But I also think that like if and when the Broncos are able to clinch the AFC West, you will have earned it, because this is not one that you like where, hey, there's no competition. No, the Chargers have been pushing you, and for all that we've just said about kind of the percentages and all that, Broncos still 73% chance to win the AFC West, 46% chance to get the AFC's top seed, which is number 1 in the conference, and then a 10% chance tied with the Patriots for the highest in the AFC to win the Super Bowl. So it's still there. I think just what you learned this weekend was against the Jags is that at home you have an advantage. You're a good football team. You can win these games, but it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win these games, especially against these top opponents. And so I think it's a good reminder that no matter who comes in to Empower Field at Mile High, or if, the Broncos stumble down the stretch here and you have to go on the road, like you can beat any of these teams, but also they're good enough to come in here and beat you. And I think that's part of what's going to make this such an exciting postseason is that we really don't know what the heck is going to happen. And you could look at any number of these teams and convince me that, like, yeah, these could be the 2 teams that are in the AFC Championship competing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. Like if you told me the Broncos were going to host the AFC Championship and you said, hey, it's going to be against the Chargers, or it's going to be against the Texans or the Jags or the Patriots or Bills or even the Steelers, like I would buy any single one of those. It's not, I heard this on a podcast this morning, like it's not a year where it's Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, Allen, and like those are the options. There are a lot of different ways.
A lot of young quarterbacks that are turning their teams around,
And like for as good as Trevor Lawrence played yesterday, and he played really well, I was impressed by Trevor Lawrence, especially the way it started early, how he responded. But like Bo Nix played that well the week before against Green Bay. And really for the first half of the Jags game, I thought he played at that level too. And so, it's a week-to-week league. And I know that it's hard as a fan to be like, which of these teams is going to show up this week. But I just would say that based on what we've seen from Denver and the way they've shown up again and again, I would expect them to bounce back in a big way this week. And I think the guys are ready to go. And, it's a short week. Like we're 3 days away from game day already, which normally it's like, oh, I need a break, but I'm just as
let's get to it.
Yeah, I'm just as ready to get back to it.
Well, Broncos Country will get you ready for that game with a special podcast that we will get to you before the Thursday matchup, and it is an exciting time. So before we close out here, records aside, obviously the fact that the Broncos lost is not ideal, but how excited are you just for this Christmas matchup? I know it's not exactly the glitz and glamour with Mahomes playing. We do hope that he has a speedy recovery. But how excited are you for just the Broncos to go out there and really showcase on the primetime stage and just kind of show like, hey, we're here to win and we're here to compete?
Yeah, I think this is like a chance for the Broncos to show what they're about. And this would be one of those games where I hope you come out and quickly kind of establish it like you're ready to go. And I think it's not the same situation as last year at home in Week 18 because Chiefs are obviously still playing a bunch of starters, and that game was largely backup players for the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. That said, Kansas City is missing a lot of guys, including their top two quarterbacks. So they're, at least from a quarterback situation, it's probably going to be the same as it was a year ago at the end of the year. And so can you, like in that game, the Broncos came out on fire. I think they scored on their first 2 or 3 drives and like put it out of hand very quickly and like didn't let – we talked all week about like you don't want to let them hang around and then weird things happen somehow, right? Like,
yeah. The weird things always creep in.
The weird things creep in
if
you don't put it away. And so that's kind of what I feel with this game as well is like, can you just put it out of control or out of the Chiefs' control quickly and find a way to go get it done? And it will not be easy. The Broncos haven't won in Arrowhead in December. The last quarterback to do that for the Broncos was Peyton Manning in 2013. I think only 3 quarterbacks in the history of the Broncos have won at Arrowhead in December. I believe it's Elway Manning and Kyle Orton, if I'm remembering properly. And so it's going to be a challenge, but there's some things on the line, right? Like you can sweep the Chiefs for the first time since 2014, and I know that Patrick Mahomes is not out there, and it's a different iteration of the Chiefs, but it still is the Chiefs, and I think that
don't say that to Mike McGlinchey because he will correct you very quickly.
That matters, and like again, I know that game at the end of the year last year was against reserve players, and this year you don't have Mahomes in there. But if the Broncos win this football game, they'll have won 4 of the last 5 against Kansas City. And you think back to where things were before, where you'd lost, I believe, 16 in a row, 15 or 16 in a row. I can't remember. I've like blocked it out of my mind because it was kind of painful.
As you should.
But Broncos had lost so many games in a row, and since then, this would make Sean Payton 4-2 against the Kansas City Chiefs since getting here. Like the Broncos, to some degree, were designed to win this football game. They were built with that in mind.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens this weekend with Houston and LA. And if you're a Broncos fan, you should like go buy some Texans gear and really be cheering for them as hard as you can. But either way, like there's a chance that Week 18 could be for the division and a whole lot more. But this is one Broncos can't overlook this, right? Like you got to go take care of business against Kansas City to set up that big game and set up a game where if you win, you're the 1 seed. But and there might be the notion to overlook this or be like, this should be an easy win. That's for media and fans. Like the team's got to be dialed in and ready to go. And I'm confident that they will be.
I think so too. And if you've seen the course of just the history of this season, they haven't overlooked anyone, regardless of record, regardless of wins, regardless of who's on the field. This Broncos team will definitely be ready, and we hope and we will see them be ready on Thursday. Well, it's going to be an exciting matchup on Christmas. Again, the Broncos will be in Kansas City to face the Chiefs on Christmas Day. That should be fun, and we'll get you ready for that with another podcast and another episode to gear up for that matchup. But for all the latest from Sunday and much more, make sure you guys visit DenverBroncos.com. As always, I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, across the table from our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. For everything that we talked about, make sure you guys check out our YouTube, our socials, and everything to get ready, and we will see you